Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
Here in episode 87, we're joined by Coralie Cooper. She's Deputy Director of NESCAUM, where we talk about the role of the organization and how medium and heavy-duty trucks fit into her work. She also talks about what influenced her work, including how her Nobel Prize-winning father made a difference in her life. Most interesting is his story about how numbers were invented. She shares her impression of NACFE's day at the White House and what's on NESCAUM's 2024 agenda. Today we have joining us Coralie Cooper. She's Deputy Director at NESCAUM. That's NESCAUM. So, okay, a long acronym there. I looked it up, and it stands for the Northeast States for Coordinated Air Use Management. Whew. And I'm thrilled to have Coralie on today. So thanks for joining us, Coralie.
Mike, it's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah. So we go way back, and I think I remember how we met, but I always ask all the friends and on every one of these podcasts. So can you tell us how we met and became friends?
My memory is that we first met when NESCAUM and ICCT were doing a joint study leading up to EPA's first heavy-duty greenhouse gas regulation, the Phase 1 regulation. And we were doing a study on the technical feasibility and costs of reducing heavy-duty greenhouse gas emissions. And we had a steering committee made up of really tremendous people. And somebody suggested that you join. So I remember meeting you then.
You're exactly right. I was thinking that too. I think I had I may have still been at Navistar or had just left because I presented to the first committee. No, I had to still be at Navistar. I had presented to that first committee on fuel economy, and then I served on the second one. So yeah, and I remember how fun it was to see your analysis on all the technologies that we were developing or thinking about at Navistar, really in the early days of fuel economy. And, maybe we'll get into this later, but that would have been in the 2007 or 8 timeframe, I'm guessing. And
Yeah.
we've come so far so fast, there at that point in time, it was just like, oh my God, we got $4 diesel fuel. I mean, that's 3 times more expensive than the average for the prior couple decades. And so we were all sort of shocked. What are we going to do? I mean, $70,000 to fuel an average semi truck. Oh, I got to do something, And so that was kind of those times.
Yeah. And we were talking about, at that point, 2008, we were talking about waste heat recovery and, aerodynamic improvements but we were not yet in the realm of electrification.
Right. Maybe we should go back have a picnic or a cocktail and look at all the technologies that we were looking back at, nearly 20 years ago and see where we are today on some of those. So let's tell me about NESCAUM. I mean, when I did look it up to get the acronym right, I saw that it was started in 1967. That's 56 years ago. Tell us about NESCAUM, Coralie.
So yes, 1967, actually, we were founded before EPA. So we really have gone back a long ways. And so we're an association of state air pollution control programs. And in the early days, it was just the New England states. So Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, and really focused on around stationary sources. The states were, regulating some of those sources, and the air pollution was, moving, air moves around. And so the states needed a forum to convene and talk to each other about monitoring and how to, control these sources. And then in the 70s, New York and New Jersey joined, and NESCAUM started working on mobile sources. And since then, we've, started working in a lot of other areas, monitoring, modeling, inventory. But really, we have, a number of roles working with the states. We have that very important convening role. So bringing the states together to look at new policies to control emissions. And we do a lot of technical evaluation. So we were talking about that heavy duty analysis, technical and cost analyses. And then we're also active in the federal space. So we participate on committees like the Clean Air Act Advisory Committee and, National Academy of Sciences committees, that kind of thing.
Are there other regional groups like this around the country, or are you unique?
There are other organizations. There's Marama, LADCO. There are others. So they're regionally situated. Marama is in the southeast, uh, you know, and so on and so forth. So we kind of have split up the country regionally.
And how does medium and heavy trucks fit into your work?
Medium and heavy trucks are a really large part of greenhouse gas emissions and criteria pollutant emissions. So, one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and then also for ozone forming pollution and particulate, they're really important. So, the states really have three main goals, and that's meet their aggressive climate goals, and then meet the air quality requirements of the Clean Air Act, such as ozone and particulate, and then environmental justice goals. And so trucks really figure in very importantly for those three goals because they contribute to climate warming gases. They're a big contributor to ozone and PM, and then also in environmental justice areas, you have a lot of overburdened communities where trucks are driving through the communities, such as near ports. And so those communities are disproportionately impacted by truck traffic. So really it's from every angle or every focus area of the states, reducing truck emissions is really important.
Yeah, oftentimes I talk about how we don't, I don't know, brag might not be the right term, but that we don't recognize the improvements that we've made in NOx and particulate matter and even carbon with improved fuel economy over the last couple of decades. From your seat and from NESCOM, I mean, how do you view where we've come versus where we need to yet go?
We really have come a long way. So we're in this for the long haul, no pun intended. But if you look at air quality in the 70s and 80s, especially around ozone, there have been tremendous improvements. So we have made huge improvements. I mean, it's actually flattened out in recent years. So ozone has sort of flattened out or maybe even increased. So we need to redouble our efforts. And in particular, there are certain hotspots where ozone pollution is especially bad in our region. So, there have been improvements. You don't see that
Yeah.
kind of brown disk of smog over cities anymore. But we still have a long way to go, even on the so our air quality metrics.
Want to talk about you and your career, Coralie. So, how long have you been at NESCOM? And even, back earlier, I mean, what experiences have you had? Are there any jobs in particular that sort of influenced you in your career to be doing what you're doing today?
In the early 80s, when I got out of college, I just had a job where I was working in New York City, and really like the air, you could see it in the summer. It was like soup on certain days.
Yeah.
And I had a coworker who would come into work and she had asthma, and it would take her half an hour just to catch her breath on a bad day. And that really influenced me. I just kind of felt like, is it legal that the air is this bad? It's causing these health problems. So that was an experience that kind of affected me. And then I decided I wanted to go into the environmental area, and I went to actually volunteer at NRDC there in New York City. And I was lucky enough to work with Rich Castle on this very innovative campaign, the Dump Dirty Diesel campaign, where NRDC
Hmm.
put advertisements on the bus saying, it could be more dangerous to stand behind this bus than to stand in front of it. That was a really influential sort of early days for me in deciding to go into this area.
Yeah, and so would you consider yourself a technologist, a general person? I mean, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I'm really, by training, I'm a planner. I have a master's in urban planning. So yeah, generalist. I mean, in my career, I've been project management probably is what I've done the most. So working with experts who are technology experts, cost experts, and pulling together analyses that support the states um, in trying to transition to um, zero emission vehicles, zero emission buildings, and other sectors.
So I have to ask you, I hear that you have a famous father. You want to tell us a little bit about your dad?
Yeah, my dad, Leon Cooper, so he's a physicist, and he won the Nobel Prize in 1972 for his theory of superconductivity, basically explaining why when electricity, when wires are chilled to near absolute zero temperatures, there's no resistance in electricity traveling through wires. Whereas at normal temperatures, there's quite a bit of resistance and loss of electricity through the wire. So he and two other physicists explained that theory.
That's fantastic. So you win the award for coolest family member from a podcast guest. What is he? How did he influence your work? I mean, I got to believe that that work just sort of feeds into a bunch of what you're doing. I mean, a lot of our work, needs to be data based and focused and so forth. And so, I have to imagine that he influenced you quite a bit in what you're doing, and maybe you him as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so he's sometimes when asked, he's weighed in on things I've asked him about work and been super helpful and just provided like very, important perspective. I mean, I think that maybe from a big picture standpoint, he's made me feel optimistic because he's made me feel like, big things can be done. But also he's very exacting. And so anything I say always has to be backed up in many different ways. And so that kind of, it's almost like training in supporting your argument. So that's been tremendous. But he's just very supportive, very interesting person, and he's been a really big influence.
Well,
I mean, maybe I'll just give you one anecdote of like how he kind of thinks about things in an unusual way that have broadened my experience. So when I was a teenager, I asked him, "Hey, Dad, like, is physics, is that a creative area like sculpture or painting?" And he said, "Yeah. I mean, think about it. Numbers weren't discovered. Somebody wasn't walking along and tripped over a rock and found a number. They were invented, and that was one of the most creative acts ever."
wow.
And so it's just kind of think about things, in an unusual way.
Ah, that's so fantastic. I've got 1,000 questions, but let's get back to you and your work. And NACFE. So let's kind of pivot to sort of like the work we kind of are doing together. So recently in November, NACFE helped organize an event at the White House that you was so grateful to see you there, where we, it was a round table on electric trucks. We brought 7 of the 10 run-on-less fleets to present in a panel. I called it the good, the bad, and the ugly of electric truck deployment. And there's plenty of good, there's plenty of struggles, and then there's a few things that are, quite difficult. And what did you think of the day? And where do you think we are with these electric trucks? You just said numbers. We can do a lot of work to get 5 or 10% carbon out of a diesel truck by efficiency, but it's 100%, tailpipe emissions when it's electric. So we gotta get these electric trucks as quick as possible where they make sense. But what did you think about the White House event?
It was a great event, and really like you contributed enormously both in your presentation, so the sort of run on less overview of the fleets that you've been working with, and then the panel that followed it. So that panel had some of representatives from some of the largest fleets, and in the audience there were some of the largest fleets in the country, and those that are transitioning to electric. And I guess I was struck by the breadth of knowledge and understanding of how to make this transition work. Not to say that the fleets, like everything was working perfectly, but what they have addressed and how they've converted and transitioned their workforce, their vehicles, their fueling infrastructure, all of their logistics. It was really impressive to see that, and there were some terrific lessons learned. Also, it was really interesting to hear about how the workforce and some of these fleets that are transitioning to ZEVs is very diverse. There are a lot of women. They're very committed to electrification. So that was great to hear about. It's not something you hear about very often. The drivers absolutely love the vehicles. So hearing about that was really interesting. There are examples of real innovation, like a fleet that needed extra electricity, and so they installed a lot of solar panels so that they could get extra power to the trucks. So all in all, it was there, it was a really interesting day, and also some very specific ideas about where do we go next? What do we need to work on? So concrete examples of what needs to happen next.
Yeah, I was real impressed with the like I'm going to use the word frankness or openness and straightforward discussions that we created that day. It was a 4-hour event with really an hour of coffee and rolls before and kind of an hour afterwards where we all took a picture. It was a beautiful fall day in DC. I mean, it's like a postcard kind of day with the leaves changing color and sun out and the White House right there. And but we created a day where people were very blunt. And a lot of events we go to, there's things in the air that kind of prevent us from, really talking openly and honestly. And there's a little bit of regulations hanging over. We've got a greenhouse gas for phase 3 coming soon. And so people don't want to be like misunderstood sometimes when they comment, so they tend to be a little more quiet. So I really felt like we got to a lot of good data and information sharing, and with a broad audience. We had utilities there, we had many government organizations there, as well as some nonprofits and for-profit companies. So I think that you felt the same, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned utilities. There's some takeaways, for example, like we have to kind of think in new ways. Like, so we have to make the case that for we're funding new wires, that this has to work for ratepayers. It has to deliver for the ratepayer in a financial way, or else the PUCs and the DPUs, they're not going to approve these changes. And so yeah, it's an example of, just kind of concrete actions that we need to take. And it was very frank, a nice size audience where people could be very frank.
Yeah, one example of that I would bring up is when we were talking about electric demand, and this has been a growing discussion on electric trucks, is just how much electricity will it take to make this happen. And you can look at the 11 million trucks in North America and add up to some just like really scary huge numbers. Now it's not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. So this will take a couple decades. But when one of the utility facing NGOs was talking about not only truck demand, but also data center demand, and how these data centers are requiring a lot of electricity, and how do we do two big things over the next decade or so? How do we do two big things over the next decade or so at the same time with an electricity grid that's been called the most what is it, the most complex machine in the world or something like that?
Yes,
Any
yes.
thoughts?
Yeah, well, I also heard in that discussion the transition to truck electrification. It's not as energy intensive as what we've experienced already with the data center demand. And so we've kind of already gone through a huge surge in demand, and we are going to go through another one. But it can be handled. Obviously, there's a lot of planning that needs to be done, and we need to think about innovative ways of storage and other ways to even out the demand. But we've faced this before, and we can make this happen in a way that's economical. So I also heard that message.
Yeah, and I think maybe I was a little mistaken there. I don't think it's the amount of electricity. I think with solar and wind and other forms, we can probably generate it. It's really getting it to the particular address and the site. So this whole piece, and that's a lot of what's going on with NACFE here in 2024. I mean, we're not going to become utility and electricity planners or experts, but helping various other groups, and EPRI and others are doing some really good work on where this truck demand is going to show up and when, and who's going to be early adopters, and what areas and utility specific areas need to be working on it. So here at NACFE, we're gonna 2024 will be a lot of us learning ourselves and helping others understand kind of what's coming. How about NESCOM? What's on your plate in 2024? Maybe specific to trucking or freight or logistics that you might want to share.
Well, so yeah, you mentioned some of the work that you have going on and others, and so we're also involved in some of those, kind of planning and strategic studies. So working under a DOE grant with National Grid and others to look at the Northeast corridor and specifically to project what demand for electrification needs are going to be for if we're going to electrify trucking. So identifying good locations for corridor charging and what the specific demand will be, and kind of identifying where should the locations for charging be based on the availability of transmission lines, land that's available, and kind of where the trucks are traveling. So find those areas that make the most sense and map that out. And then I think the next thing that has to happen is to then take the next step, which is to actually get these locations, get this charging infrastructure in place. And there are federal grants that are coming that can help with this. So the climate pollution reduction grants, charging and fueling infrastructure grants. So uh, we're going to be thinking about both looking strategically, where are those sites, where does the charging need to be, and then getting the funding in place for starting to put the charging infrastructure there. So that's one part of it. There's also another part, and I mentioned kind of NESCOM's early history and how we started out, but we've really branched out over the years, and we have three task forces now that are working at NESCOM. So they're not, one is transportation, one is buildings, and one is wood heat. But together, those three task forces were working with 23 states, including Hawaii and Alaska, and then states in between. And then we're working with municipalities such as Fairbanks and Missoula, and then we have the province of Quebec. And then also on those task forces, we typically have worked with air quality staff, but we now work with, Board of Public Utility staff, DPU, we have the departments of transportation, we have energy. There's a whole host of new staffers that are coming to work with us and to tackle these problems in a lot more jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So I think that's the future. We have to be coordinating across government and across agencies.
Yep. I think that you're exact. I mean, when I look even at how do you get a electric or how do you get a truck depot electrified? There's a lot more players than we've ever had to do anything in trucking. And so you combine the big data of where are the trucks, where's the electricity, where's the real estate, with the fact that we're working with a lot more people. I mean, this is exciting. It's a little, it looks a little tough, but I think we got the tools and we got the people to go get it done. You talked about the diversity of the folks working on this and the passion they have. I'm just really confident. Coralie, the time always flies. What sort of like for the audience we have here, and through your experiences, and maybe it's this collaboration piece. What's a suggestion or two, or how do you think we should all tackle this, truck opportunity or freight opportunity? Do you have any suggestions for everybody listening?
Well, I think, we have to do a couple things. First, I think we do have to think a little bit in different ways than we have traditionally. So as I mentioned, we've got to reach across levels of government, and we're starting to do that. We need to continue it and double down. We have to be talking with the utilities and the DPUs and everything to get these pieces in place. And then I think we need to keep going on things that we've always done well and continue to do them. So technical and policy analyses, cost analyses, and then analyses that are going to make kind of incremental improvements, like how do we have consistency in charging infrastructure, both for the payment and for what kind of chargers people are using, so that they can just expect the same thing every time they're going to a charger. and then working on things like permit streamlining, so that when when we need to put a charger in place, it can happen quicker than it happens today. So I think there are a number of things that we need to be working on. And then big picture, just keep in mind that we've come a very long way from where we were in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And we have a long way to go, but we've done this before. We've accomplished a lot, and we're going to continue to accomplish a lot.
Yeah, very good. I heard from you there, keep your eye on the prize and be strategic, but things like permitting and payments. I mean, when we find an issue that's at a real tactical level around this journey, let's go fix it or improve it, put the tools in place and get on with it. Be urgent about those things. So, Coralie, it's been so much fun. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's been a lot of fun.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.